All right, everyone, welcome to today's Tuesday Times Roundtable. If any of you are in the midst of midterms like I am, strength to you. I know not every class has midterms at the same time, but I know the ones I'm in the middle of that right now, so I feel you if you're going through that. But I'm glad you made it out to today's Tuesday Times Roundtable. I'm glad to present both of our moderators for today's session. First, we have Cristobal Perez, who is an educational psychologist. He obtained his bachelor's degree in Denver and his master's degree in Santiago, Chile. He's worked with at-risk youth, supervising social workers in nonprofit settings, and conducting trainings to social service agencies, attorneys, and federal and local law enforcement agencies and health providers. He currently works for the state of Florida, for the Department of Children and Families, supervising the programmatic aspects of the Unaccompanied Refugee Minors Program. And we also have Florencia Dominguez. Florencia is the outreach coordinator at the International Rescue Committee in Miami, where she manages IRC's awareness initiative providing outreach and education and training on human trafficking. She holds her BA from right here at FIU in International Relations and a minor in economics, and a certificate in Latin American and Caribbean Studies. She's currently working on her Master's of Public Administration degree from Penn State. So welcome, Cristobal and Florencia.
Hi, thank you, all of you, for being here. We truly appreciate it. With midterms going on, it's lunchtime, so thank you so much for being here. I just wanted to point out something really quick. For us, it's really important that we get your opinion on this type of training. So we created a poster. It's placed by the exit. And the poster is basically asking if you learned something new about human trafficking. And you'll see two stickers. One is green and one is red. So if you can please, if you learned something new today, put the green sticker on the poster. If you feel that you didn't learn something new, just place the red poster. And this is not only for us as trainers to learn more about what you guys think. It's also for our grantors to learn if these are working, these type of presentations are working or not. So thank you so much again for your time. And again, for taking the time to do that for us. And yes, today we're going to talk about the relationship between international business ethics and human trafficking. I'll start with okay, so the organization I work for is an international nonprofit organization. It's called International Rescue Committee, and it has different programs. It works with refugees, asylees, responds to the worst humanitarian nations, even either man-made or nature-made. And it was funded in 1933 by the suggestion of Albert Einstein. The IRC anti-trafficking program in Miami it started in January of 2003. We've been federally funded since then to provide services to victims of human trafficking. We provide services to domestic, foreign-born, minor adult, female and male victims of trafficking, either in the labor industry or sex trade. And besides the direct services program, we also have an outreach component. It's a federally funded project as well called Rescue and Restore, in which the main aim is to identify victims of human trafficking in our communities. To do that, in order to achieve that goal, what we do is a lot of trainings, public awareness events, outreach events, and also we provide technical assistance to other providers as well.
Okay. Can you guys hear me all right? Yeah? All right. Okay, Department of Children and Families. I don't know if you guys really know a lot about the different programs that DCF has, but one of them, and I'll try to keep it short, is that specifically related to trafficking victims, right? So in this case, aside from working with the Unaccompanied Refugee Minors Program that works directly with minor victims of trafficking, DCF also gives out benefits as refugees, which is basically 8 months of services once they become certified in the United States. And yeah, there's a child maltreatment code, which is a pretty big deal in terms of being able to identify trafficking victims. So we create this awareness, and so yeah, that's basically our just background real quick.
And as I mentioned to you, okay, so we'll focus on the relationship of international business ethics, right? We do a lot of trainings on human trafficking 101, and maybe you guys attended some of those already, either by IRC, or by your teachers, any other presentations out there in the community. But we thought that since we are exploring the topic of human trafficking, it will be really interesting to see the link, right, between international business and human trafficking. So that's the purpose of the presentation today.
Real quick, that if you guys want to interrupt us or ask any questions, please feel free to do so, like while we're doing this, because it's going to be as interactive as possible. All right.
Okay. So how many of you briefly heard about human trafficking? What do you know? What do you think human trafficking is? Okay, so right now there's been momentum, everybody's talking about human trafficking, but some years ago that was not the case. If you go back to the year 2000, there was these instances of labor exploitation / kidnapping / abuse, but it didn't have a name, right? It wasn't slavery as we thought as it happened before. This was a new form of slavery, and that's why human trafficking is called modern-day slavery, because is no longer slavery through shackles, through only physical restrictions. It goes way beyond that. So again, if you think about it, this is pretty new. Although this type of slavery has been happening forever, it's a new topic. So as it's new for us, it's new for the law. The first law that came related to modern-day slavery came to life in the year 2000, right? So it's only 16 years old. And it came through the Palermo Protocol. In one of the protocols, one of the things that stated is that prevent, suppress, and punish trafficking in person, especially women and children. And that's basically what it said. Because of that international law, the U.S., the federal government, came up with the TVPA, or what is called the Victim of Trafficking and Protection Act. So since the inception in the year 2000, it has been reauthorized 5 times. But what we're going to start to see is that law is going to keep on changing. Again, because the crime is not new, but the description of it and the law is new. So we need to keep working on the law aspect, right? I don't know if you want to add something. Yeah, one of the
is also about the Palermo Protocol is that, for example, they include organ trafficking as which isn't included in what we have here in the TVPA, and it's important to understand what kind of benefits each one of these would bring, because again, in the United States, they only follow the TVPA. So that's one thing that I wanted to mention as well.
Okay, and going with that also, besides organ trafficking, the Palermo Protocol considers illegal adoption, human trafficking. Under U.S. law, illegal adoptions are not considered trafficking, and that goes to your point on touching the population of kids. That's something that maybe the U.S. law needs to revise. On the national level, how the law describes sex trafficking is the recruitment, and I'll read, recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, or obtaining of a person for the purpose of a commercial sex act, in which the commercial sex act is induced by force, fraud, or coercion, or in which the person induced to perform such act has not obtained 18 years old. So a lot of you mentioned the commercial aspect. That's detrimental for something to be considered trafficking. And also you mentioned coercion, right? So besides coercion, it has to be coercion, fraud, or force. And there has to be a commercial aspect to the transaction.
The next one.
Okay, sorry. So the same happens with labor trafficking, right? Is every part, if you help in every part of the process, you're considered a human trafficker. So it's the recruitment, the harboring, transportation, provision, and obtaining of a person. But the main difference between labor trafficking and sex trafficking is that if you recall, when we are talking about sex trafficking, it said if you're 18 years old and you're involved in commercial sex, automatically under the law, you're considered a victim of human trafficking. So if you're 16, 17 and engage on sex for any commercial exchange, automatically you're a victim of trafficking. When it comes to labor, even if you're a minor, you still need to prove force, fraud, or coercion. Okay, so how many of you heard that Florida is the top 3 in the nation for victims of human trafficking. Okay, so it's pretty popular, right? So statistics in human trafficking are really hard to gather because, again, it's a hidden crime, it's a new crime, so a lot of institutions are working on the statistics. But how that came into life, into probably assessing that Florida is indeed number 3 or in the top states when it comes to human trafficking, is because there's a national human trafficking resource center hotline. And due to the amount of calls made to that hotline, it can be assessed that Florida is in the top 3 states. So also you can see Texas, New York, and California. And if you think about it, these are all big. Exactly. They're also there's a lot of immigration coming and going through those states. Also, they're big on tourism. So there's a lot of correlation on those 4 states and human trafficking.
Absolutely. One thing that hopefully you guys keep in mind also is that industries. What type of industries are in each state that we're talking about, right? Because each one of these, as you can see, or what we'll be talking about, again, we're going to try to link this to business, right? And like an aspect that normally isn't talked about a lot with trafficking. So I'll get into that a little bit more, but keep that in mind when we're talking about, Florida, Texas, New York, and California, what industries are based out of there that can also be impacted by this.
There you go. Okay. So keeping up with the statistics, so almost 21 million people are in slavery around today. So there's more people actually enslaved in a slave situation today than there were during the transcontinental slave trade. Globally, only 40,000 victims were identified last year, but that's why the U.S. government is putting such an emphasis pursued in identifying victims, right? So they're funding a lot of federal programs because it's known that the victims are there. It's just that we need to identify them. And I don't know if you guys heard about the Trafficking in Persons report. That's a report that comes from the Department of State every year. And basically what it does, it kind of ranks nations into their efforts in combating human trafficking. Right now, 188 countries are included, but if you're ever doing research or want to learn more about trafficking, this is a great resource for you to explore. And okay, so going with business, right? So why do you guys think trafficking is so popular? And he says it's right there, yes. And we'll go through that because not only they can do it illegally, there's something called also temporary work visas. And there's a mechanism for contractors or for the business to exploit that, and we'll go over it. But what I wanted to point out here is that if you see it says $150 billion industry, this came from the TIP report, the report that I just mentioned before from the State Department. If you go back to that report, 2 years ago, I think it was, 3 years ago, 2013, that number is going to be 39 billion, right? So we can see the amount of growth that this business has, the human trafficking as a business has. And again, it has the demand for cheap labor, commercial, and very important, the fact that you can reuse time and time again the humans.
Bringing it back to business, and sorry if Florencia and I get a little long-winded. This presentation, it's a lot longer, so we try to shorten it and we kind of go off on tangents sometimes. But okay, so going back to this. So the idea over here as to what we were trying to do is to show you guys kind of that this isn't only a problem within the United States, okay? That this is a problem globally, and over here, again, the concept is that everything gets interrelated, right? So when we're talking about, it's not just, like the typical kind of, sex trafficking case that you hear in the news. It's a lot more complex than that. And again, this is, bringing it back to business and how eventually, normally we would ask all of you guys what you guys are studying and how to relate it all. But in this case, to try to shorten it, we're just going to try to, make it overarching in this sense. So to say that, how all the countries now with globalization are involved, it's pretty obvious, right? So that's what this is trying to explain, and that it's just starting or like, again, as Florencia said, we're just starting to see how all these things are linked, right? So the Department of Labor, for example, has identified a certain amount of goods that that could be affected by this, right? So in this case, they identified about 122. So, and I'll get into that here in a bit, but in terms of, yeah, you can go to the next two ones, actually. So risks posed to businesses, right? Just running through this. What kind of risks do you guys see before I kind of go into this? What do you guys see as risks in terms of businesses or things that you guys are related to? Closing of the business? Okay, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think you guys get the general idea in terms of, you know, legal liability, the brand erosion, or things that will impact, in that sense, jail time as well. Now, I wanted to bring this back to specific examples that might have happened here or that you guys might have heard of, right? So over here in the bottom, you know, we see the. Have you guys heard about like the tomato farms that out in Immokalee? No, you have? Oh, right on. Okay. So yeah, do you know about the Coalition of Immokalee Workers? No? Not really. Okay. Right. Well, so basically what happened is that if you guys ever drive out to Naples, the Naples area, there's an agricultural area called Immokalee, right? And there they do a lot of tomato growing as well as other vegetables. But the main thing there is tomatoes. Now, also another, just as a side note, in Central Florida, there's a lot of oranges and other kinds of products, right? And again, that's why I'm talking about businesses and industries that are in South Florida or in Florida. That's why they make it so important. So in this case, for example, the Coalition of Immokalee Workers, they created, they wanted to get 1 penny more for the pound, and there were no industries that wanted to get involved with this. So to get a reaction out of this, they started creating these protests, these movements, right? And so in this case, for example, Publix was one that didn't, and I believe they still haven't signed off on this. So other industries, like which we'll get into examples later, but there are other big industries that have signed off on this and that haven't necessarily gone through that brand erosion as, say, like maybe Publix or in that case up there, Wendy's. You know, so we're talking about big companies here that, you know, everybody knows Wendy's or Publix, you know, living here in South Florida. And so you see how there are these movements that are taking place. This is international. It's about Nike and how Nike's made the product, right? I hope you guys don't get the idea that, you know, either Florencia or I are after any of these companies or agencies, you know, like that's not the case. It's just I want to explain to you guys how a brand has been affected by this sort of thing. So yeah, let's go to the next one. So, okay, in Africa, for example, bringing it back to the globalization aspect of it, what products are out from Africa that can be related, say, to products here in the United States? See, and you know what's important to relate to kind of to both of your guys' examples is that the fact that, say, you know, if you subcontract with an agency and you don't know where a product is coming from, your brand is still related to that, right? So, like for example, going back to if Publix didn't know where the tomatoes were coming from, right? They just know they're getting the tomatoes, but the people that they subcontract with are related to that somehow. Do you know? Does that make sense? So again, so you know, here this example is from Africa, and there are other products over here. You know, like it's cotton as well, gold, copper. In the United States, what's important to, I guess, what the idea originally is to say globally this is what's going on, and now bring it back to the United States, right? To see how all of these examples are taking place. So again, the United States is, and I'll actually just go straight into the national examples that we can use here. So right now, going to some of, I believe you guys have to read an article, or you have an article in front of you. Is that right? Yeah? Okay. Do you want to?
So we picked that article, and it's talking about new legislation. And you can go over, but basically it's talking about new legislation. At the time of the article, President Obama was about to sign the legislation. Actually, it was signed, I think, 4 days after. And it's interesting because this presentation was created way before that. And this video we're about to show you, we're going to show you a little clip, but talks about the problem. And it's so interesting that while sometimes we might feel discouraged that nothing is being done, or these large schemes or things that seem out of hand, legislation actually can happen, right? So this is what we wanted to point out with this.
Yeah, this example. And so in this one specifically, it's related to shrimp, right? And so you might not think, or why shrimp? And so it's going to be interesting to see what you guys think about this one. Oh.
Prawns, or shrimp if you're American, once a luxury are now an everyday pleasure. Cheap for us to buy, the human cost of their production is unimaginable. This is the story of globalized slavery, and how giant international supermarkets like Walmart, Tesco, Carrefour, Morrison's and Iceland are selling prawns fed by slave labor. The Thai fishing industry is rife with abuse, torture, and summary executions. Thailand is the world's largest supplier of prawns. A 6-month Guardian investigation has traced the complex food chain from the boat to the supermarket shelf, proving for the first time that the low price of the prawns on your plate depends on slave labor.
So we just kind of cut it off there. If you guys want to see it later, it's a great documentary, and I believe Eric said that the person that was also involved with the Guardian spoke in here. So no, yeah, it's great to have somebody that actually was involved with this. So again, what we're trying to do here is kind of explain to you guys how, again, maybe in this case Walmart didn't know who they were getting their shrimp from, right? So, but all of that now, like you'll see how we'll present the laws that have started up because of this. And Walmart was involved, whether they liked it or not. So now that's a national example, and like that there are others, whether it's Apple, Samsung, Nike. Again, there are a lot of them. And again, when it's related to globalization, you see a lot of them. Now Florencia is going to talk about some local examples.
So we talk right out, Florida being one of the top states in the country that with human trafficking, and you guys give some great ideas of why, right? So we talk about tourism, we talk about weather, we talk about being a port and a border kind of state. So here what we see a lot on human trafficking from our cases is, of course, the sex industry. And also, I don't know if you guys know about agriculture and the amount of farms that we have. For example, right here in Miami, down in Homestead, in Florida City, we have all these nurseries and farms, and a lot of labor trafficking is going on right here in our backyard. It's a huge issue, and the thing is that it's affecting domestic. Usually before, the thought was like victims of trafficking are all in foreign-born victims. The problem is that it's also the amount of domestic cases, and it's affecting U.S. citizens greatly, especially in the sex industry. So that's the thing, and like you said, it depends on the state. Here in Florida, not only we have that with sex industry, with the labor, specifically sex industry is a form of sex trafficking, is a form of labor trafficking, but here also we have a lot with the tourism in the hotels. For example, in West Palm Beach, we can tell you in the area of West Palm Beach a lot of cases that for Filipinos, for example, that unfortunately were trafficked. Working in hotels or working in restaurants where they thought they were going to do one thing and end up doing something else. And all of this is going on in our area, right? It's not something that happens abroad, like far in the distance. This is something that is common, and the victims are among us. It's not that they're shackled or anything like we talked before. Yes. Well, I can tell you, and just to give you an idea, when it comes to sex trafficking, and I'm going to, again, the statistics are really hard, but I'm just going to go off IRC in Miami statistics. I can tell you we've been federally funded since 2003. Right? We serve more than 420 victims. We didn't get to see we didn't have a grant, let's say, to assist domestic victims of trafficking until 2013. So it's only been 3 years. We serve victims from more than 40 countries. I can tell you that United States ranks number 4, number 5. So you can tell, right, just from a local statistic from one office, you can tell how prevalent human trafficking is among the domestic the domestic cases U.S. citizens, specifically with sex trafficking.
Now, coming from the state, I can give you kind of just the statistics from what I know, what I've seen, is that labor is more, you see more labor cases. We have more certification letters, which is where the United States acknowledges that you're a victim of trafficking. These certifications letters, they've been associated more to labor than sex as of recently. And to add to that, labor is more foreign-born than domestic.
Well, I can give you a quick overview. You know that TVPA, that law that we talked in the year 2000? Those federal programs that the government created, a lot of those are to assist those victims of trafficking, and they're not sent back. But it's not that easy, though. It's not that someone will say, oh, I'm a victim of trafficking, and automatically you get certification or a T visa, right? It goes through a process. They do help with the investigation, trying to put the traffickers in jail so this does not continue. But what you have to think about sometimes is that these foreign-born victims, what happened is that the trafficking incident maybe the recruitment happened at home, right? Let's say Mexico. And then they came to the U.S., they were brought, or whatever situation they might be, that trafficking happened here. They can go, a lot of times they cannot go back. If they go back, the trafficker associates might recognize them and kill them. They might even threaten their family. So there's a lot of issues. Not only there's some form of immigration relief for those that help law enforcement for the purposes of the arresting the perpetrators, but also as a protection for the victim. Sometimes they cannot go back home. There's different points of view on that, and there's a big movement of defending the rights of sex workers, because some people might choose to go that route. When it comes to minor, again, if he's under 18, under the law, it doesn't matter automatically if you're involved in commercial sex, you're a victim of trafficking. But again, when whatever industry you're in, you don't have a choice anymore of getting out, or you are coerced, then that can become, prostitution can become trafficking.
And just in terms of remembering, or if you want to know what trafficking is, because sometimes it gets blurry, you need to have two things: restriction of movement and forced labor. All right, so kind of what piggybacking on what Florencia was saying is that, yeah, it can be any industry. In this slide, we basically lumped in what could potentially be domestic and foreign-born trafficking. So yeah, maybe there are certain areas, say in North Miami, in which you'll see more domestic cases, but I do also know that we've worked with cases that, say, Russian. There are Russian immigrants out over there that have also been victims of trafficking out over there. So I know that there has to be a mix, most likely.
There's a mechanism. There's different things, right? Again, just to get an idea, I think that TVPA gives authorization to issue, I think, up to 5,000 T visa applications. In the amount of years that the law has been in place, we haven't reached the 5,000. So that tells you that it's not that easy to apply for a T visa. Okay. One of the mechanisms that the federal federal law enforcement agencies use when they're not too sure and they need to continue an investigation, there's something called CP, or continued presence. So we're getting really specific, but that continued presence gives temporary status to the victim while law enforcement is conducting the investigation. Up to yesterday, that CP could only be issued for periods of 1 year, and only by 2 federal law enforcement, by Homeland Security and by the FBI. Yesterday, we attended there was a talk in the White House about human trafficking, and they announced that this continued presence now is extended for a period of 2 years. So what it means that the law enforcement agency can investigate further, and they don't need to send the person back home for that period. But in that continued presence period, the person might be able to work. If he's an adult, they will get a work permit. They will get some benefits for a short period of time, but they're not residents yet. So that's one of the mechanisms that the government is using to investigate these cases.
Uh-huh.
I think I know which one are you talking about. There's a lot of what organizations are doing to tackle the issue with domestic human trafficking, especially in the sex industry. There's a lot of a lot of public awareness, and that is being trying to be an issue. A lot of local organizations are trying to bring awareness to the schools, trying to try to implement in the curriculums talks about human trafficking, what it is, grooming, the grooming process, and all of that. So it's crazy what's going on, and that's why so many people are trying to address this issue that, of course, is not only affecting foreign-born victims, but domestic cases as well. Going on with that, what can we do about it? So we wanted to talk what industries and governments are doing to address this issue, and that's why we picked this particular article to talk about it.
Okay. So in this specific article, again, what we're trying to get, and actually you guys have kind of been bringing it up little by little, is that, and bringing back to something that Florencia said about the TIP report. The TIP report also kind of qualifies countries as to what type of country you are in terms of supply, demand, and recruitment, and that sort of thing, right? So the United States actually is a destination place. It's a source place, like what you're talking about, whether it's domestic cases or not, and then also a transit country, right? So those are the three types that you can be. So basically, when President Obama was talking about this, he says that it needs to be tackled on different levels, right? It's not just the federal government. It needs to be private. It needs to be NGOs. Everybody needs to be working together to solve this, right? So, and normally if we had more time, I would show you kind of just his speech, but we'll just go over it real quick. So again, and what he's talking about, again, in terms of the global problems is that there needs to be something that affects the global trade. Because, and let me see here. So, okay, this is just the executive order that talks about the taxpayer money, that the taxpayer can't be associated to payments that are related to trafficking, right? But so the thought is that there's a tariff that took place, or that started in 1930, that basically allows companies that if they are bringing in a certain amount of good and there isn't enough supply, that they didn't need to be checked upon, like their background, right? So they would allow all kinds of goods to come in, and normally where Homeland Security would say, okay, let's stop this, or let's look into it, that didn't necessarily happen. So that basically with this new law, it's stopping that. And so when we're talking specifics over here, when I was researching it, it specifically talks about the fish in Southeast Asia, the gold mining, and the garments owned by people in Bangladesh. So again, this is looking at it globally, right? And how industries are affected now by that. So okay, I also wanted to include other laws. Again, sorry, I should have explained this before. What we're going to be talking about here is that, okay, so President Obama is talking about the response about the federal government. Then there's also the state level, right? What states are doing, and then also businesses or local companies. So in this case, what we were trying to do with this example is that it's not only other laws that at the federal level, but also the Apple case that took place actually also affected state law, and in which it's the California Transparency and Supply Chains Act. So what was interesting about that case, if you guys ever want to read about it, is that it not only affected how Apple views their supply chains and how they had to change their process of working with companies, but it also changed the state law and also impacted in other laws that I guess at a federal level. So it's interesting as a case study if you guys ever want to read about that. So okay, in this case, this is another resource that the federal government is giving, and it's great if you guys ever want to check it out. It has a lot of information in terms of if you want to read about a certain good, about certain countries that are related to certain countries, goods that are related to certain countries, or things like that could be really important for you guys for when you guys are finding a job or want to research a specific subject. This website's very good for you guys to learn about. Let me see here. So okay, now so that's kind of a quick summary as to what the federal governments and state laws are doing. So now we're going to talk about businesses. How are businesses reacting to this?
And there's the Global Business Coalition Against Human Trafficking, right? So this coalition was built on an effort to kind of have these big companies engage against human trafficking. So their main purposes, they have four main objectives, and one is they provide training and education, also check the supply chain. They raise awareness for the employees and in their practices of sex trafficking, and communication and outreach to it says through thought leadership and transfer of best practices.
So here, yeah, no. I just wanted to go back to this slide real quick. Why do you guys think, like, I mean, because you see Coke, Ford, Delta. Why would all these companies get together? Why do you guys think that that's taken place to create this coalition?
Exactly, and again, right? See, if we put it in a marketing perspective, right? He talked about protection, but also doesn't that make the Hilton look better, like socially responsible? So it's a good also for their marketing strategy, right? If we put it into the business context.
Absolutely, no. And one thing that because I think it's great to bring up the Hilton to kind of bring it down to local level and see what we as all people can do, and each of these industries should be doing something similar. They all have to be, and I'm kind of jumping kind of as to responsible things that different companies can do. But your example is great. I think that, yeah, it really can show how each of these companies is doing something to help out, right? So, and again, just one last thing is that all of these companies found out that somehow they're related to trafficking, right? So whether it's Delta bringing people in, or Coke because of how they create Coke, the ingredients. So like again, so you'd think you would never associate that sort of thing, but I just kind of wanted to explain that.
Okay, so there's a great tool, right? So let's say, I don't know how many of you are thinking of going into the business, in the private sector industry. Maybe you'll be business owners one day. But this is a great tool for business owners, right? Or corporations. So Made in a Free World basically can help you develop policies, best practices, code of conduct. So this is a great tool also for the business to utilize. And I'm thinking like maybe before today, if you were a business owner thinking of it, you didn't know that this exists, right? So that's why it's important to promote it, so every business or every corporation can do something to implement these type of practices in their daily transactions or businesses. So from the U.S. government response, we talked about the laws and we talked about a little bit about law enforcement. Going on with that, the Department of Homeland Security created something called the Blue Campaign, and maybe if you've been in airports recently, you've seen their outreach material. They have posters promoting a number that people can call, and also when you arrive from a foreign country, they will put some type of information about trafficking in your passport. And actually, because of this campaign, cases have been discovered and identified. So this is a really useful campaign.
You bring up a really good point in that, when Florencia and I do this presentation, normally it doesn't always end up kind of on a happy note and saying, hey, here are the solutions. You know what I mean? Like, because you bring up a very real and a problem that hasn't been able to get solved socially just yet either, right? So all of this is kind of just like presenting ideas and concepts that you can relate to what you see in all reality. But yeah, I mean, this presentation doesn't solve what you're bringing up. I completely agree with what you're saying in that we don't solve, like, if somebody wants to snitch out or report something, maybe they can't, Yeah, that's a problem that unfortunately, we haven't seen what can be solved like that, However, keeping that in mind, if there are certain things that we can do, like what Hilton is trying to do at least, they're making an effort at least, and to do something the right way. And following with what you're saying, the same way you're seeing it as individuals, businesses also can see it as corporations, right? So again, kind of like this is what's ethically responsible, right? We'll try to quick. Okay. All right. So basically, some of the ideas here is, and you guys have kind of thrown some concepts around about it, but making sure that as an agency you provide the proper guidance, right? So knowing the type of business relationships that you guys do have. Let me see here. Let's go through the next one. Okay. So you're talking about, and I don't know if this one talks about it, but having an anonymous tip line. That actually has helped out, and I know that it is a step in the right direction. Also, unannounced visits to if you're working with subcontractors. I know, like for example, the Hilton and other hotels, they subcontract for their cleaning services, and so the Hilton there needs to know who they're working with, right? So let's go to
the same with the Coalition for Immaculate Workers. For example, here in Central Florida, there's a lot of there's an organization that does a lot of unannounced visits to the farms to check the conditions of the workers.
And sorry, this is an important part where we're kind of doing it really quickly. But okay, so in this case also making sure that the employees understand why this is related to, or why their business is related to trafficking. A lot of the times, people don't necessarily make the connection as to where they're working or how it would impact them. So again, it's one of the suggestions. This is all coming again from the global business, against trafficking. They're the ones that bring this up. So again, it's important that they're the ones that are presenting these ideas. Creating awareness campaigns. Making sure that there are proper partnerships in different countries. And let me see here. And again, the grievance mechanisms within their company to make sure that people can report this adequately. So let me see here. Normally we would ask you guys for examples that you guys might have seen, but Florencia, do you want to take this one?
Here we have, so we talked that the idea is not to leave discouraged, right? So you at least we're recognizing the problem. So there's a couple of things that we can do as individuals that then can translate into businesses one day, right? So one thing is to check the slaveryfootprint.org, and you can do that exercise at home, and it's pretty interesting. It will tell you how many slaves you have working for you because of the items that you consume, right? So that's one thing. Another thing that I wanted to mention, we were talking about anonymous call or being afraid, not being afraid, but how do you protect yourself when reporting or something like that. And there's the National Human Trafficking Resource Center hotline number, and you guys have that number in both the program abstracts and the bookmarks. So this is a national program in which victims can call to receive services, but also if you want to report something, you can call and your information will be kept anonymous. So those are a couple of things from the individual level that you guys can do today.
And I think that's our information if you guys need to contact us. We basically got it there on time. But,
okay, yes. It was a little bit rushed because usually we take more time to do this, and it's a complex topic. But we wanted it to present it to you because you have a global perspective, right? Since you're with global learning. We might not have time, but if you can take the time, there's a poster with 2 stickers. One is red, one is green. If you can put the green one if you learn something new, or if you can put the red if you didn't learn something new, we truly, truly appreciate that. And Alexis can help us. I think he's in the back. So if you need any guidance or anything, she's there. Thank you.
If you guys have any questions, if you guys don't have time to stick around, or again, you can meet with us after as well if you guys want. Here. All right. So thanks you guys for coming on out, though.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.